Have you ever watched a series out of order, or read a book out of order? This has happened to me a couple of times. The first Wheel of Time book I read was Fires of Heaven, book 5 in the series. I watched a certain scientific railgun before I even knew that a certain magical index existed. And I read the Hawk and Fisher series before I read Blue Moon Rising. I'm here to help you so you don't make the same mistake I did. Welcome once again to Musings by Danon. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Danon, and I've been watching anime since 1985, and I'm currently reading over 500 manga or light novel series. This means that most of the content on this channel is about anime, manga, and light novels. But every once in a while, we'll talk about something different here. Today, we're discussing one of my favorite underrated fantasy novels, Blue Moon Rising by Simon R. Green. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly ask you to like and subscribe. It really does help the channel, and it's free. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. This is a long series, 14 books in total, that span a myriad of adventures. Now, as I stated earlier, I started somewhere in the middle of the series, specifically the Hawk and Fisher novels. I was at a grocery store perusing their dismal collection of paperbacks when a single cover caught my eye: The Guards of Haven. Now, I don't judge a book by its cover, I want to read the style of the author. If it's a new author that I've never read before, I want to see if I like their style. So I cracked open the cover and read the first page. When you are tired of life, come to Haven, and someone will kill you. That is a great line. I continued to read about the city of Haven and how vile and corrupt it was, until, after another page, I got to the character introductions. Hawk was tall, dark, and no longer handsome. The series of old scars that marred the right side of his face gave him a bitter, sinister look, heightened by the black silk patch over his right eye. He was lean and wiry rather than muscular, and building a stomach, but even standing still, the man looked dangerous. There was something about Hawk, something cold and unyielding, that gave even the hardest Bravo cause to think twice. On his right hip, Hawk carried a short-handled axe instead of a sword. He was very good with an axe. He'd had lots of practice. Isabel Fisher leaned companionably against him, putting an edge on a throwing knife with a whetstone. She was tall, easily 6 feet in height, and her long blonde hair fell to her waist in a single thick plait. She was heading into her late 20s and handsome rather than beautiful. There was a raw-boned harshness to her face that suggested strength and stubbornness, only slightly softened by the deep blue eyes and generous mouth. Sometime in the past, something had scoured all the human weakness out of her, and it showed. She wore a sword on her hip in a battered scabbard, and her prowess with that blade was already legendary in a city used to legends. Don't you love it? How great a character introduction was this? So of course, I had to buy the books. It turns out, these were murder mysteries. Fantasy murder mysteries. When the cops need backup, they called SWAT. Special Wizardry and Tactics. No, the series isn't a comedy. Do not think you're reading Terry Pratchett when you read this series. But there is a levity and humor that breaks the dark fantasy. Think of it like adding salt to a cake. You add a hint of sourness to help bring out the sweetness. Or in this case, a bit of humor to prevent you from going mad. Now, throughout the books I was reading, Guards of Haven was a collection of 3 of Green's shorter novels, Wolf in the Fold, Guard Against Dishonor, and The Bones of Haven. Hawk and Fisher make reference to events in their past. What could have caused Fisher's weakness to be scoured out of her? What gave Hawk his scar? He jokes about losing his eye in a poker game, but no matter how bad of a situation the two find themselves in, Hawk and Fisher always respond with, "I've seen worse." Whenever they're asked about how they met, Hawk says that he rescued a dragon from Fisher, to which Fisher solemnly nods. In another scene, Hawk and Fisher had to go undercover. A wizard employed by the city guard tried to use transformation magic on them, but the magic just slid off of them. We were up north when the blue moon rose, so transmogrification doesn't work on us, they explain. The watch commander and the wizard just stare at them, in awe. And of course, the most important question, why are 2 of the toughest fantasy characters I've ever read scared of the dark? It wasn't until later that I would find out the answer to those questions when I finally got my hands on a copy of Blue Moon Rising. Since then, I've had to purchase the book 3 more times because I keep loaning it to friends, and they conveniently forget to give it back to me. In this book, At the time, Hawk was known as Prince Rupert, and Fisher was known as Princess Julia. Blue Moon Rising starts out with our hero, Prince Rupert, being very angry at minstrels. These damn bards always talk about how the pure and righteous hero rides his noble steed off into danger, but they always seem to forget how to mention how to get rid of a mosquito that's stuck inside of your breastplate, or the best way to keep rain from dripping down your helmet, or how annoying and snarky unicorns are. Of course Prince Rupert's riding a unicorn. As a prince, and the younger prince at that, his duty is to serve as a backup, just in case his older brother dies. His duty is not to father bastards. And what quest was Prince Rupert sent out upon? To slay a dragon, of course. You see, the Forest Kingdom was broke. So, once Rupert slays the dragon and brings back the Horde, all their financial woes would be handled. And if he died in the process, or just ran away, then the kingdom wouldn't have to worry about a civil war. After all, kingdoms don't want two adult princes. So, Rupert rides his trusty unicorn through the ever-thinning Tanglewood, which serves as a sort of boundary meant to keep the Darkwood at bay, and eventually through the demon-infested Darkwood. For some reason, the demons hold themselves back from our hero, but the experience left Rupert scarred. Eventually, he reaches through to the other side and finds himself at the foot of a mountain, the peak of which is where the dragon makes its lair. Leaving behind his trusty unicorn, Prince Rupert climbs the treacherous peak to face off against the dread foe. He calls the dragon to combat. "Come forth, beast, so that I may slay thee." The dragon eventually pokes his head out. Why do you want to do that? It's complicated. I figured it would be. Come on in. As it turns out, the dragon didn't want to be slain, and also, his hoard wasn't worth very much. After all, this dragon collected butterflies. He did have a captured princess, though. This caused Rupert to angrily draw his sword, but the dragon assured him he didn't like eating humans. They gave him a serious case of heartburn. Princess Julia is more than happy to be rescued. And the dragon, happy to be rescued from the princess, decides he wants to tag along as well. Of course, on their way back, they must travel through the Darkwood again. Only this time, the demons don't stay back and watch. Bleeding, bruised, and dying, the dragon uses a little of his magic and summons the Rainbow Road. Rupert sprints down it, finds the rainbow sword at the end of the road, returns, raises it above his head, and the rainbow slams into the darkness, disintegrating the demons. Eventually, the prince and the princess, the unicorn and the dragon all make it to the forest castle, only to discover that Princess Julia is actually the fiancée of Rupert's older brother. So the romantic spark that they had going doesn't look like that's going to be happening. Also, since the Darkwood is quickly expanding, swallowing up entire villages, Prince Rupert will be sent back out into the darkness to track down the Archmage. Also, everyone in the throne room got to find out what happens when 30 feet of dragon breaks wind. Twice. This series is a dark fantasy. Lots of blood, death, and violence. But it breaks it up with levity and comedy. Lots of good jokes throughout the series. And you do find out what exactly scours all human weakness from Julia, aka Isabel Fisher, in this book. All the stuff I've mentioned so far is only in the first quarter of the book. We haven't even gotten to the meat of the story, where the blue moon rises and darkness covers the land. And brave men and women are cut down like chaff before a host of demons. One of the concepts you see in some fantasy series is the idea of the crucible. You put 1,000 people into an impossible situation and most of them will die. But those who survive and, more importantly, stayed and fought against the overwhelming tide come out stronger. Far stronger than people who simply had good training. This is why, with the exception of Duncan, Idaho, the Sardaukar overwhelmed the Atreides. It's why the 300 Spartans were able to stand firm against the Legion of Xerxes. And it's why a small group of heroes, led by Prince Rupert and Princess Julia, were able to survive the long night and overcome the blue moon rising. But no one gets through a situation like that completely unscarred. Simon R. Green has several other series that you may enjoy, including some urban fantasy, but the only other one I can personally recommend is the Deathstalker series, which is his space opera. It is just as dark and bloodthirsty as the Hawk and Fisher series, but set in space against the backdrop of a psychotic emperor. So if you want a fun fantasy series that seems heavy at times, but has enough comedy to help lighten the load, check out Blue Moon Rising by Simon R. Green, and his later series, the Hawk and Fisher novels. If you're into D&D, these two are hands down the best presentation of lawful good in a non-D&D based book I've ever read. I'll post a link down below so you can order the first book from Amazon. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, a huge shout out to my editor Cutestuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, she can be reached at cutestuff.edits@gmail.com. Link is down below. If you're looking for ways to support the channel directly, you can head on over to patreon.com/Danon. There are several tiers to choose from. You can pick up an anime or manga for me to do a video about, or you can join our monthly manga club. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons: Waffles, Jiraiya, Danny, Muffins, Marcus, Squishy, Brett, Roxy, Josh, Sean, Pob Zombie, Mark, Alex, Daniel, Steve, Alex, Cookie, Borgie, Jake, Exiled Rogue, Manassas, Nazwin, Oolong Pedro, and Aranor. You guys are awesome. I post new anime or manga videos often, or you can click here to watch additional videos. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time on Musings by Danon.